ISO 27001 is a security framework like many others. I mean, there's NIST and there's a lot of other specific ones, but I would say this is a more generic one. It's more common in the European region, and obviously it looks more comprehensive. I would say. I mean, first opinion already coming out after 10 seconds. Yeah, it looks more comprehensive because there's more chapters and there's more sub-chapters and there's more points. So usually when we work with frameworks that help us to build our own ISMS, IT security management system, or building our own version of the framework with processes and procedures behind it and with policies, then of course the more comprehensive the blueprint, that seems to be better. Yeah, because if you have 100 points to check and to define processes for each and everything and find good evidences and artifacts to prove the point, or you have 500 points, sounds in the first place more comprehensive and more detailed and more guided. Yeah. The only thing is that really necessary? Does it really help you to steer security better? That's usually the ultimate question, because if you have a policy with 1,000 points and it takes you a year to go through from one point to another to do an assessment, you may have not much time to really implement measures, because the year is over and you may have to start from the beginning again and you keep assessing yourself. Yeah. And that is usually not a good thing, because ideally you should improve and then reassess and move on. And if the reassessment, let's say this kind of regression of your maturity in this state takes longer than the actual execution of the measures, you may face a problem that, yeah, you never get things done, simply speaking. Yeah. But nevertheless, let's walk through this ISO 27001. It has 12 points. Yeah, it starts with simple things like risk management. I think we have a separate episode on that. So usually defining the risk management process, how to identify, how to record, how to mitigate, and how to report and monitor risks, which is a good thing. I mean, it's a good that takes number one, because that is what it's all about. Yeah, that's why we are building these kind of frameworks and procedures, because we want to mitigate the financial damage to the company, which is equivalent to the risk that may occur. Yeah. And then, of course, and that's where I'm a bit disagreeing, point number two, but let's not see it as a chronological order here. Security policies. Writing them is usually not an issue. Adhering to them, finding a mechanism of continuous check, that is usually the problem. Yeah? And ideally, the security policies are containing everything else that it's in this ISO 27001 framework. So maybe it would have been better to put it at the end and say, when I walk through everything here, I know what policies I want to set up for which area and how deep I want to go. Yeah? And how thorough I want to follow up on these policies. So next point, organization of information security. That's usually one slide. It's the org chart. Yeah. How do you manage security? Who decides? Who overrules? Who escalates? Yes, you can follow classic roles. Who is the CISO? Yeah. Who is the information protection delegate, or whatever you want to call those people? Yeah. At the end of the day, you need a couple of people that take care of certain key areas. Yeah, and that's the org chart. So that should be also very simple, because if you have to make a rocket science out of that, you obviously have too many people for too many topics that never come together. Asset management would have been also one of the categories I would have pulled to the front, because if that's not done thoroughly, you don't know what you're protecting. Human resource security is an interesting point, which you hardly can find in other security frameworks, because it's never really pointed out like this, and which is putting the human as one of the factors of risks in on the center stage. And it is not just talking about users and stakeholders, but it's also talking about critical roles in the company and by who are they held, and how do you want to ensure that you don't have a gap. So let's say if you have someone who is running rocket science, cybersecurity, vulnerability management stuff, you may want to make sure that this person is solid and you have a backup and you have a certain segregation of duties there, maybe. So that's the critical point here. It's not spying on your own people and protecting your company. I mean, you don't have to go to that extent, but you have to create some kind of a workable metric so that you protect yourself and you protect the people also in the same way, and protecting them from overloading them with privileges. Then physical environmental security, it's a simple one, but again, especially when cloud is coming to every company and all the on-prem data centers are disappearing, then most likely it's becoming a little bit more like a due diligence check with your cloud provider. Communication operation is a big one because it somehow contains a lot of stuff that is communication in terms of data flow, information flows, and securing that, but also the whole operational excellence thing behind it, to how to patch and how to run the applications in a good way. So it's a bit of an overloaded point. I find it's a bit too generalized compared to the other ones. I would have loved to see here more breakdown and say there's some kind of real maintenance management activities like backup recovery, patching, handling problems, incidents, and changes and stuff like that. And communications, I would have probably put separate and said this is maybe more a data protection thing, which is close to asset management and where you monitor information flows. And but not always the information flows like seamlessly. There's a lot of hybrid things with data at rest, data in transit, and some protocols in use. So I would say this is a bit too high level here. But if you go deeper, there's a lot of subpoints that are relating to exactly what I just said. Access management, classic one, belongs to the front right after asset management because that's where it starts. And normally, when you talk about human resource security, access management is close to this because you have to see, are the right people having the right access to information? Are there no privilege creeps and stuff like that? So definitely deserves in the, as I say, it's not a chronological order, but technically, if you have to work through this list, you should have that as one of the first topics and settle that, because that determines also. I mean, I say the best encryption doesn't work well if your access is not right. So you have the most rocket science key management with rotation and everything and the highest encryption protocol, but if you just grant access to everyone and don't verify it, then encryption doesn't matter so much anymore. Uh, Information systems acquisitions, development and maintenance. Again, a big term covering the whole system development life cycle. Why is it having this acquisitions word in there? It's because not everything you're going to build yourself. So it's, I mean, there are hints and bits and pieces how you run your own DevOps in a secure way. But likelihood that you're engaging a vendor for modules or parts of your system, or even the entire implementation plus an integration partner who built the system into your company, is quite high. So that's why the word acquisition plays a major role, because you need to know how to buy services like this. Yeah, literally procure them and get them settled and set up in your company seamlessly without having hiccups between contractual agreement and the actual implementation. Um, Information security incident management, great thing. Again, should be one of the first. The process must be clear and there must be a fast path approach to this. Business continuity management, that's basically when your incidents went south and you have bigger problems than you thought, so that you know how to plan it out. We have a separate episode on that, explaining what the planning is behind, what kind of scenarios you should consider, and how you should do reality checks on this, and how you should be prepared maybe for having the lights off for a couple of weeks and not just recovering from a faulty hard disk. Yeah. So, but it's a general one. Again, I would, everything that's related to the business, I would rather pull it to the front. And of course, at the end, the good old compliance, which is probably the last one. So the policy should be before that. So if you have set up your policies, how do you ensure compliance? Because compliance is a little bit the soft motion on the policies to say, do you adhere to it? Where's the evidence? How do you do it? Maybe I can run an audit, so that we are not always performing a reality check and a real incident and then doing a lot of lesson learned and doing a lot of changes, but we're suffering all the time while we're doing it. So compliance would be the tool to rectify it a little bit in advance.